Hello, all my little tater tots. I hope you guys are all doing well, and I hope that you are truly enjoying our new chapter book read aloud, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. I'm so glad that Caden recommended this story to me. I'd never read it before, like I said. I am loving it. I hope you guys are loving this journey that Edward is on as much as I am. And we're going to jump in to chapter 14. Remember yesterday, Malone, or Edward, got some new clothes. Boole had made him, he took a stocking cap, remember, and made Edward a shirt and then some handkerchiefs and made him some pants. So now this is what Edward looks like. And he is traveling with Boole and Lucy. And I think that Edward really does love them too. So let's jump in. At first, the others thought that Edward was a great good joke. A rabbit, the hobo said, laughing. Let's chop him up and put him in the stew pot. Or when Boole sat with Edward carefully balanced on his knee, one of them would call out, "Got yourself a little dolly, Boole." Edward, of course, felt a surge of anger at being referred to as a dolly. But Boole never got angry. He simply sat with Edward on his knee and said nothing. Soon the men became accustomed to Edward, and word of his existence spread. So it was that when Boole and Lucy stepped up to a campfire in another town, another state, another place entirely, the men knew Edward and were glad to see him. "Malone!" they shouted in unison. And Edward felt a warm rush of pleasure at being recognized, at being known. Whatever it was that had begun in Nellie's kitchen, Edward's new and strange ability to sit very still and concentrate the whole of his being on the stories of another became invaluable around the hobo campfire. "Look at Malone," said a man named Jack one evening. "He's listening to every dang word." "Certainly," said Boole. "Of course he is." Later that night, Jack came over and sat next to Boole and asked if he could borrow the rabbit. Boole handed Edward over, and Jack sat with Edward upon his knee. He whispered in Edward's ear. "Helen," Jack said, "and Jack Jr. and Taffy. She's the baby. Those are my kids' names. They are all in North Carolina. You ever been to North Carolina? It's a pretty state. That's where they are. Helen, Jack Jr., Taffy. You remember their names, okay, Malone?" After this, wherever Boole and Lucy and Edward went, some tramp would take Edward aside and whisper the names of his children in Edward's ear. Betty, Ted, Nancy, William, Jimmy, Eileen, Skipper, Faith. Edward knew what it was like to say over and over again the names of those you had left behind. He knew what it was like to miss someone. And so he listened, and in his listening, his heart opened wide and then wider still. The rabbit stayed lost with Lucy and Boole for a long time. Almost 7 years passed, and in that time, Edward became an excellent tramp, happy to be on the road, restless when he was still. The sound of the wheels on the train tracks became music that soothed him. He could have ridden the rails forever. But one night in a railroad yard in Memphis, as Boole and Lucy slept in an empty freight car and Edward kept watch, trouble arrived. A man entered the freight car and shone a flashlight in Boole's face and kicked him awake. "You bum," he said. "You dirty bum. I'm sick of you guys sleeping everywhere. This ain't no motel." Boole sat up slowly. "Roo, roo, 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 roo." Lucy started to bark. "Shut up," said the man. Ooh, that's not very nice, is it? He delivered a swift kick to Lucy's side that made her yelp in surprise. That's pretty awful. All his life, Edward had known what he was, a rabbit made of china, a rabbit with bendable arms and legs and ears. He was bendable, though, only if he was in the hands of another. He could not move himself, and he had never regretted this more deeply than he did that night when he and Boole and Lucy were discovered in the empty rail car. Edward wanted to be able to defend Lucy, but he could do nothing. He could only lie there and wait. "Say something," said the man to Boole. Boole put his hands up in the air. He said, "We are lost." "Lost? Ha! You bet you're lost." And then the man said, "What's this?" And he shone the light on Edward. "That's Malone," said Boole. "What the heck?" said the man. He poked at Edward with the toe of his boot. "Things are out of control. Things are out of hand. Not on my watch. No, sir. Not when I'm in charge." The train suddenly lurched into motion. "No, sir," said the man again. He looked down at Edward. "No free rides for rabbits." He turned and flung open the door of the rail car. And then he turned back, and with one swift kick, he sent Edward sailing out into the darkness. The rabbit flew through the late spring air. From far behind him, he heard Lucy's anguished howl. "Ow! Ow!" she cried. Edward landed with a most alarming thump, and then he tumbled and tumbled and tumbled down a long, dirty hill. When he finally stopped moving, he was on his back, staring up at the night sky. The world was silent. He could not hear Lucy. He could not hear the train. Edward looked up at the stars. He started to say the names of the constellations, but then stopped. "Boole," his heart said. "Lucy." How many times, Edward wondered, would he have to leave without getting the chance to say goodbye? A lone cricket started up a song. Edward listened. Something deep inside him ached. He wished that he could cry. Oh, that was a really sad chapter. He was just getting settled into life with Boole and Lucy, and they were on a rail car, which is on a train, and they were kind of catching a free ride on the train, and probably one of the men who works at the train station caught them, and he was not happy that they were in the rail car, and the train started moving, and he kicked Edward so that he would fly out of the train. And now Edward is without Boole and Lucy. So now Edward has lost a lot of people, and I think he's really started to know how to love people. I think he really does love people now. What do you guys think? That was kind of a sad chapter, but I'm sure that Edward's journey will continue. So next, we will read chapter 15. This is the picture for that chapter. So we'll have to see what happens next in The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. All right, friends, have an awesome day, and I will see you soon.